Hello friends, it's Cindy Brumbaugh from cindyleebdesigns.com, independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. Today I'm going to show you two techniques using embossing folders, and they are really cool. So we're going to work on the techniques here. It might take a couple minutes, and then I'm going to show you how this card was made. I'm using that really gorgeous Pretty Flowers embossing folder from Stampin' Up! This came coordinating with the Shaded Summer, and then we had the summer dies during a celebration, I do believe, last year. So this is still current. I love the font in this stamp set. So I just made simple cards, but showed off techniques using this embossing folder. And again, it is called Pretty Flowers. So the first one we're gonna do, it has like a carved wood technique. When you see this in person, my husband was even like, wow, that's really cool. So I'm going to show you how I achieved this really cool wood texture on here that looks like you just carved into the wood. And I use the Pretty Sentiment, and I'm also using on both of these cards these awesome Brilliant Wings dies that are still current as well. You can cut out all the dies at one time with different colors, background, and then you can put in like a lacy die like here. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is how we're going to do this wood grain inlaid carved wood technique. So I'm going to put some scratch paper here, and the first thing I'm going to do is bring out, I want to keep this so you can see this here. There we go. Let me see. We'll put that pretty little card there. Okay, so I started off with a 4 by 5 1/4. All the measurements, all the products I use are always over on my blog, cindyleebdesigns.com. Right underneath the YouTube description, it says visit my blog here. Press the link, takes you right over there. And you will go over there today because I'm going to have the rest of the card and the details of what I did on my blog. So you'll hop over there, grab a cup of coffee, tea, or a cocktail or something, and you can browse around my blog there. So we're going to stick this 4-inch side up against the top of, I'm using my Simply Scored tool, but you could also do this, I'm sure, on just on anything that you can score. But I do like the nice score line it does here. And I'm just going to score this very vanilla. I thought that went well. Every 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to go every 1/2 inch. And we're just making kind of like wood planks here. And these little grooves are going to be very helpful in achieving this technique. Oh, great, I got them all straight. So we have these little grooves scored into our paper. I'm going to put my little Simply Scored tool away. And what I'm going to do, now I do suggest having a dry ink pad for this. I used crumb cake and soft suede, and I have to tell you, I brought out my old stamp pads because when I used the juicy ones, I got too much ink, and I'd rather have a little less ink on here to achieve this effect. So I am using an older one I haven't used, and it's actually very dry. So what you're going to do is just swipe your ink pad right over your paper, just direct to paper, and see how I'm just getting a different tone on there. And like I said, the first one I used my crumb cake that of course I had just recently inked for some projects, so it really just was so dark. So you can see the look I achieved there using my dry ink pad there. I don't think you could sponge on here because you're going to get into the groove, and you do want to have that the groove showing distinctly. So I just used, you know, that. So if you and you can do this with different colors. I'm just happening to do it with wood. So I just happen to be doing it with wood. So now we have our grooved very vanilla with the light crumb cake over it. I was thinking it would be fun to do this with like a light smoky slate and get that, you know, fixer-upper look too. So the next thing we're going to do is take our embossing folder, and we're going to deboss this because we want the embossing to go in the opposite way. So if you look at your embossing folder, in this particular one, where did I put that? Okay, this particular one is one of the ones made by Stamping Up. So you're going to put the words Stamping Up here. Now, if it's another embossing folder, because this works with really any embossing folder that's kind of random and has big embossings in it, but actually I have done it with little tiny detailed, real ornate ones too. And this is ornate, but it's got some deep embossing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over. Okay, that means I'm going to be debossing it. Then I'm going to put it in here like this. So remember, if I was going to emboss this and I wanted the embossing to show, I would put it in this way, but I want to deboss it, so I'm turning it so that the raised portion that you usually see embossing is down on the bottom. And then I'm going to put my planks in there, and then I'm going to run this through my Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. Now, if you're using your Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine, you're going to take out the number 2, and you're going to put 1, 3, and 3. And I think that's a little bit of the most confusing part of the new machine, is because we have different folders that were made after we didn't carry the Big Shot anymore. And even though this does the same thing, it's the embossing folders that change there. Okay, so we are going to run that through the embossing folder. Now I'm going to have you just take a peek there while I run this through. Get it debossed. Bringing it back over. Okay, and now I've debossed my planks, and you can see that the opposite part is sticking up here. So now we have this, and we are going to, and you can play around with different embossing folders which way you want to do this, but I did do it this way because I want this part raised up. Okay, did you ever like put your embossed paper the wrong way on your card and like, oh, I like that? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is the soft suede. Now, when we drag our soft suede across here, it's only going to be picking up the raised up portion. And actually, now that I think about it, you just need to remember that part, because I think that when you do use this particular Pretty Flowers, it looks great either way. So, but just remember to flip it over and then put the right side up. Okay, so now we're just going to do this right on camera, and I'm just going to drag. Look at that. Look at the magic. Ah! And it's almost like you don't want it to hit everywhere, because it gets that like burnt wood look to it. I mean, is that cool or what? And I'm not even going to touch this anymore because I do not want to mess it up. So is that just so cool looking? And these parts where it's not totally colored on, it looks like the wood underneath. And you know what, no, I'm not gonna touch it. I'm gonna mess it up. But it just gives that really neat look of when you used to do that wood burning technique and carving into wood. So that is what I did, and I did get a little more color, I do believe, on here, but I just love how this turned out here. And what I did here is I used one more die set here. On this one, I went ahead and I die cut Very Vanilla, the plain butterfly, and I did one in Early Espresso. But when I put it on here, you could see bright Very Vanilla there, so I sponged on some crumb cake, so it diffused the brightness of that. And I just used these beautiful shapes dies. I've been using these a lot with these hexagons. Has some circles and some cute sentiment things, and these little diamonds, and so many things you can do with these beautiful shapes. When they first came out, I was like, I don't know, but then I'm like, yeah, I'm using them a lot now. So I just did the happy birthday. I put some of our metallic dots on here, I do believe. The metallic dots, they came in the He's All That, the men's set bundle that we have in the annual catalog. He's All That. Yeah, I think that's what it's called. So that gives you that really fun look there, and called carved wood technique. Okay, the next technique we're going to do, I'm going to set this aside, takes a little more ingenuity here. Now this one uses some shading, and it's perfectly smooth, but it uses the emboss resist technique. So what we're going to do with this one is use this Pretty Flowers embossing folder. We are going to find where the piece is missing. We're going to take a piece of wax paper, not parchment paper, not freezer paper, wax paper. And we cut this down to 4 and 5 1/4. And I'm just going to put that into our embossing folder. And I'm just going to emboss this piece of wax paper. So I'm going to have you take a look at this. Wow. I run this through my, and with this one, you're also going to do the plate, the 3, the embossing folder, and the 3. And we're going to run that through. Okay, why am I sticking here? There we go. I had my plates not straight. Make sure you have them flush when you're doing that. That's why it was giving me a little hard of a time. I kind of got caught on it. I'm thinking, I have the plates right. Okay, so here we go. We have this, actually, something pretty in itself that's beautiful here. You have, do you know what I did though? Did that work? I think it did. You know what, I rolled it twice. Let me just cut a piece of wax paper again. So you take another pretty look at that. I'm just going to, and I have one over here. Whoops, hit my head on my light. Okay, I do have another piece. I'm gonna run this through here. Another piece through. There we go. And I'm gonna run it through one more time here, because whenever I ran it through that second time, I think I moved it a little bit. And moving it kind of moved the image on my embossing. Okay, so there we go. We take it out. We have this really cool look here. Now with this, you can see the embossing that's onto this wax paper. So the next thing we're gonna do is get some scrap cardstock. I just had some of this generic cardstock from somewhere, and we're just gonna make yourself a little ironing board here. You're gonna wanna use an iron. I've poured all the water out of my iron. I have to go grab it here. To make sure I'm using it here. I'm just gonna make sure it activate the on it. So you're gonna use an iron, a dry iron. You wanna make sure I've put it on dry, and I've also made sure I had no water in it. And you might just even wanna use, say, an old iron that you have. And where are my pieces of paper? Great. I had everything sitting here ready to go. Especially, where did I put it, guys? Oh, I sat my Simply Scoring tool in there. So what we're gonna do is, what I did was take 2 pieces of my basic white, and I put a little squiggle on them, because when you do this technique, you're not going to be able to see the embossing that happened on it from the wax paper. So if you just kind of squiggle on the front and the back, and then I put a star on this one because I'm pretty sure that's the side that's going to get the embossed, these little raised areas. So think about your raised areas are going down. And so I'm just putting this wax paper down on a piece of white. Then I'm putting the next piece of white on top of it. And I could start doing it right here, but you really do want to put a piece of just copy paper. You can see, just computer paper, printer paper. I'm just putting that on top of that, and then I'm going to iron over this. And like I said, once again, you're just going to be ironing. And what we're doing is taking and transferring the wax that's on the raised portions of the embossing folder. And we're just putting it, and you can use this paper over again. I just happen to have this extra iron. I don't know where it came from, but I'm just keeping it in my craft room. And you put this piece of paper over your 2 pieces of Whisper White with the wax paper in between, because in case you have like if you're wax paper, you just don't want to get it over your iron. So I'm just kind of moving it back and forth carefully so that I don't move it. I'm hoping I'm not moving it. And I'm hoping I put my little star on the right piece that I want to emboss. If not, you just emboss a piece, and I mean, they're both going to turn out. You just, okay. So now we have used our dry iron with no water in it. And then we're going to take our piece of scratch off of there. And we have these 2 pieces here, and you can save this to use this again. Right now it's just, and I might have some residual steam coming through there. And then we're going to just take a piece of scratch here, because we're going to now sponge onto this. Now remember, this side here was touching. Now I do know there's something on there. You just really can't see it. But I do believe this is going to be the side we want to emboss. Now, we know that this is a scrap part because I put a pencil mark and I put a star saying, I think that's the part that did the most wax there. And like I said, it's the part that has the lined images that you can see, like on when we did this. It's the raised up portion here that's going to do that. But both sides do get the wax effect. So then we're just going to take, and like I said, I had these around before we came out with our awesome ones, and I do have, but might as well use them up, right? Okay, so we're just going to take some Highland Heather ink, and we're going to get some ink on here, and we're just going to sponge. And you're going to see the magic, once I start getting ink on here, of that wax coming through. And you really do have to get some ink on here, because right now you're thinking, where is it, Cindy? And I'm thinking the same thing, because maybe it's the other side that has the embossing showing. It's kind of hard to see. Let me see, maybe it is this piece that has more of the embossing on it. Yeah, okay, it's the opposite way. And like I said, it doesn't hurt. So you haven't lost anything, you haven't ruined anything. I just picked up the wrong piece. So see that embossing that's coming out? So we're gonna say that the star I put on the bottom meant that one isn't, and this does have embossing on it. It's just not as heavy. And knowing me, I'm probably just gonna pitch that. But look at that resisting. So it's kind of like doing a embossed resist. And you see, it's just our ink is resisting the wax that was carried over. But you can't feel it. It's not like when you wet emboss something with a heat gun. You can't feel anything on it. It just totally feels flat. But that wax is on there. So you can see how it really works well with a ornate die. And then I'm just going to fill in these areas. If you can see on this card, I popped white in between my Highland Heather card base. And both of these card bases were half of a cardstock sheet. It's 11 scored at 5.5, and it's 4 1/4 wide. I didn't even have the inside done yet. So I'm just putting some ink on here. If I sponge off from these edges, I get more of an effect here, and then it'll really pop off that with that white there. Now with this card, is that a cool effect? Don't you just want to run and look through all your embossing folders to figure out which one is going to have this cool effect? Ha! So just using this Pretty Flowers embossing folder, we were able to do this resist. And once again, what we did is we ran our piece of wax paper through the embossing folder, okay? Then this is what we set down. Then if you sit it down, depending on which side you do, you'll figure it out. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to have 2 sheets here, and one's going to be the perfect one that you want to do, and maybe not the other one, okay? So what I did is I just put, let's pretend this is white and this is white. I just put this through on a piece of white and put another piece on top, and then I put a piece of copy paper on top of there. I ironed it very slowly, no steam, no water in your iron. Maybe keep an iron just for that, but you should protect your iron with this piece of paper. So even if you're using your own iron, you're fine. But you know what? Stick an iron in your craft room. You know, it's going to fit in real well with all the other things you put in there. So then we pulled it off, and we just sponged over, and the wax that lifted off the wax paper left you a place to resist the ink. So on this one, I just used a sentiment from that shaded summer here. This Above and Beyond, there you go there a lot, and then you can just put one of those on the inside. And then I just used those Brilliant Wings, and on this one, I just put the Highland Heather underneath the butterflies because the white pops up off here, and so does the Highland Heather off this card base and this white here. So that is your wax paper resist embossing. Pretty cool, huh? And this one's a little lighter, so each time it turns out you can do this ombre, you could do darker up to lighter. You could also do purples and blues and greens and have different colors on here. And then this one, this technique, I'm gonna close this so I don't get the stuff out everywhere. This technique is the carved wood technique. And what we did is we took our very vanilla and we scored it every ½ inch. After it was scored, we put it into, where's that embossing folder? After it was scored, we looked at Stampin' Up, or your manufacturer, opened it, and put our scored piece up. Ran it through the embossing folder, brought it out, and then you're gonna see these little white lines because we ran it, I was trying to do a repeat here for you. Okay, you can turn off the video right now, or you can stick around. After we scored it, we did crumb cake, ink to paper, drag it across there. Remember, we drug it across. So make sure when you're putting it in your embossing folder, you will have color on it. Then we put it in our embossing folder, ran it through. When we brought it out, we had it debossed into those planks that were covered in crumb cake. Then we took our darker ink and we slid it across. And you came up with that really cool carved wood technique. So 2 fun little techniques. This literally took me no time at all to do. Like, think about that. Score, 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 score. Drag crumb cake, run through your embossing folder, drag another color of ink. Done. This one, you just did the same thing. You just embossed wax paper, put it through, and sponge it, you're done. So 2 fun techniques you can do. And like I said, I used the Brilliant Wings dies. Use whatever you have. Use whatever embossing folder you have. I just decided to bring out this shaded summer. I'm so glad it carried over. It has got the most beautiful sentiments in there. Now, the one thing is I don't know where I put my summer dies. I was looking all over those today. When I revamped taking retired stuff out, I don't know where I ended up putting it, but it wasn't actually retired. Ding dong. Okay, so there we go. A fun little technique you can do. Jump over to my blog. I'll give the steps written out for you so that you know exactly what you need to do for each one of those steps. Thanks for buzzing by, friends. Don't forget to subscribe when you're over at my blog. I like to post Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and anytime there might be a promo or some news from Stampin' Up you need to know, or a special from me or something like that. So subscribe to my blog there. Underneath my photo, you'll see the subscribe, put in your email. You'll be notified each time that I post. And also subscribe to my YouTube channel. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this. Thanks for buzzing by again, friends.